The Jin Dynasty had 400,000 soldiers. Genghis Khan sent 10,000. His generals told him it was suicide. He told them it wasn't about the numbers. The Jin Dynasty was not a small kingdom. It controlled all of northern China, a territory larger than Western Europe, home to 50 million people, defended by the largest standing army on the continent. Their cavalry had fought for a century. Their walls had never been breached. Genghis Khan controlled nothing but horsemen and grassland. No cities, no granaries, no siege weapons. Every military calculation said this was not a war. It was an execution. And the Mongols were the ones who were supposed to die. In the spring of 1211, Genghis Khan crossed the Gobi Desert with his army. When Jin scouts reported back to the emperor, the numbers didn't make sense. The Mongols had cavalry, fast, experienced, disciplined cavalry, but not enough of them, not nearly enough. The Jin Dynasty mobilized its forces, 400,000 men, against 10,000. Somebody was about to make the worst mistake in Chinese military history. The question was, which side? The Jin Dynasty, the Golden Empire, had ruled northern China since 1115. They were Jurchen people, originally from Manchuria, who had conquered the previous Song dynasty's northern territories and built one of the most sophisticated administrative systems in the medieval world. Their army reflected this sophistication. 400,000 soldiers under arms, cavalry, infantry, archers, and a new weapon the Mongols had never faced at scale: gunpowder. The Jin used firebombs, early grenades, and incendiary arrows in battle. They had engineers who could build field fortifications in hours. They had supply chains that could sustain a campaign for months. And they had walls. The Great Wall had been maintained and reinforced specifically against steppe nomads for decades. Every pass, every mountain crossing, every river ford was guarded. The Jin emperor had been told that no nomadic force had ever successfully invaded from the north in living memory. He had no reason to doubt it. The Mongol army of 1211 had almost none of what the Jin had. No cities, no permanent supply depots, no siege equipment, no gunpowder weapons, no formal military engineering corps. What they had was this: every Mongol soldier had been riding since age 3. Every Mongol soldier could shoot a composite bow from a galloping horse with enough accuracy to hit a man-sized target at 200 meters, a feat that took European archers years of dedicated training to achieve from a standing position. Every Mongol soldier could cover 80 to 100 miles per day, sustaining themselves on dried meat and mare's milk, requiring no supply train. And every Mongol soldier fought under a command system that was, in 1211, the most sophisticated military communications network in the world. Messengers, smoke signals, flag systems. Genghis Khan could reposition 10,000 cavalry across a 20-mile front faster than the Jin emperor could receive a report about what was happening. They did not have more men. They did not need more men. They were fighting a completely different kind of war. To understand what happened at Yehuling, you need to understand one thing about Genghis Khan that most accounts miss. He was not brave in the way the stories suggest. He was something more dangerous than brave. He was patient. For 2 years before the main engagement, Mongol forces probed Jin defenses, learned the terrain, identified which Jin commanders were competent and which were not, tested which units broke under pressure and which held. The 1211 invasion was not a cavalry charge. It was the end of a 2-year intelligence operation. By the time Genghis Khan committed to the battle at Yehuling, he already knew how it was going to end. His 3 senior generals, Jebe, Subutai, and Mukhali, had each independently developed the tactical picture. They did not disagree about the plan. They disagreed only about which direction to attack from first. That is the kind of army that can beat 400,000 with 10,000.
The Jin Dynasty's military had one structural weakness that Genghis Khan had spent 2 years identifying. It was enormous, and enormous armies move slowly. When the Mongols crossed the wall in 1211, the Jin emperor's initial response was to dispatch regional forces to contain them. This was the correct tactical instinct. The problem was that the Mongols didn't stay in one place long enough to be contained. They moved too fast, struck too hard at supply convoys and secondary garrisons, then vanished back to the steppe before relief forces arrived. By the autumn of 1211, the Jin emperor had been forced to consolidate, pulling his scattered regional forces back to assemble a single massive response army near the Yehuling Pass in the mountains north of Zhongdu. This was exactly what Genghis Khan needed him to do. A large, slow, consolidated army was not a problem. It was a target. The Mongol army's signature tactic, the one that won Yehuling, was the feigned retreat. Here is exactly how it worked. A Mongol cavalry unit would advance toward the Jin lines, engage briefly, exchange arrows at distance, then turn and ride away, hard, at full gallop, looking to anyone watching exactly like a cavalry unit that had been repulsed and was fleeing in panic. Jin cavalry commanders, seeing the Mongols run, would do what cavalry commanders are trained to do: pursue. They would break formation and chase. And as they chased, spreading out, losing cohesion, moving fast and disorganized across terrain the Mongols had already surveyed, two things would happen. First, the fleeing Mongol unit would suddenly stop, turn, and begin firing arrows backwards from the saddle. The Parthian shot, perfected by Central Asian cavalry for centuries. The pursuing Jin cavalry, bunched together, riding fast, became a target that was almost impossible to miss. Second, from both flanks, the main Mongol force that had been waiting out of sight would close in. The pursuing Jin cavalry, now spread out and disorganized, would find themselves surrounded by an enemy they had thought they were chasing. The Battle of Yehuling opened on a September morning in 1211. The Jin relief army, between 300,000 and 400,000 men, had assembled near the mountain pass. Their commanders knew the Mongols were somewhere to the north. They did not know exactly where. The Mongols knew exactly where the Jin were. Jebe, commanding the Mongol vanguard, led the opening feigned retreat. His unit appeared before the Jin lines, exchanged arrows, and ran. The Jin cavalry commander, precisely as expected, ordered pursuit. 40,000 Jin cavalry broke formation and chased. They rode into the valley that Jebe had chosen the week before. The Mongol flanking forces, waiting in the ridgelines, descended. The 40,000 Jin cavalry, spread across a valley floor, found themselves engaged on three sides by an enemy that had not been there a moment ago. The feigned retreat had turned the Jin army's numerical advantage into a liability. 40,000 men in a valley are easier to destroy than 40,000 men in a formation. The destruction of the 40,000-man vanguard took less than 4 hours. When the main Jin army, positioned at the mountain pass, received word of what had happened, the response was the opposite of what effective military command required. Instead of holding position, fortifying the pass, and forcing the Mongols to fight uphill against prepared defenses, the Jin commander ordered a general advance. He was going to avenge the vanguard with overwhelming force. Genghis Khan had been waiting for exactly this decision. The general advance brought the Jin army off the high ground and into the open valley, precisely the terrain where Mongol mobility was maximized and Jin numerical advantage was minimized. On flat, open ground, 10,000 Mongol cavalry could be anywhere in minutes. On flat, open ground, 300,000 infantry
moved in a mass that was, by Mongol standards, essentially stationary. The Mongol forces split into multiple columns. They did not fight the Jin army.
They circled it, cut its supply lines, killed its messengers, destroyed its flanking units before they could reinforce the center, and prevented any organized retreat. The Jin army did not lose the battle. It dissolved. Here is the question that every military historian asks about Yehuling. Why didn't the Jin simply use their numbers? 400,000 soldiers is not an army you lose by accident. So why did they lose it?
The answer is structural. Large armies in 1211 did not function like large armies in the modern sense.
They were not one unit. They were hundreds of units, each commanded separately, each receiving orders through human messengers on horseback. The time between a general issuing a command and the furthest unit receiving it was measured in hours. The Mongols understood this. Every feigned retreat, every flanking move, every deliberate provocation was timed to exploit the gap between when the Jin commander made a decision and when that decision actually reached the soldiers who needed to act on it. By the time the order arrived, the situation it was responding to had already changed. The Jin army's size was not a weapon. It was a weight.
By nightfall on the second day, the Jin relief army had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. Casualty estimates from Chinese chronicles range from 100,000 to over 200,000 dead. The Mongols lost, by their own accounts, a fraction of that number. Genghis Khan did not pursue the survivors immediately. He let them go, back to Zhongdu, back to the emperor, carrying the news of what had happened. The message was more valuable than the kills. Yehuling was not an accident. It was a system. And that system produced the same result everywhere the Mongols applied it, from Persia to Poland to the Korean peninsula. To understand why, you need to understand three things.
First, intelligence wins before the battle starts. The Mongols did not arrive at Yehuling and improvise. They arrived having spent 2 years mapping the terrain, identifying the Jin army's command structure, and rehearsing the exact tactical sequences they intended to use. Modern military doctrine calls this ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Genghis Khan called it common sense. Every valley, every ridge, every river crossing between the Mongol steppe and Zhongdu had been surveyed by Mongol scouts before a single cavalry unit committed to the campaign. The Jin commanders were fighting the battle in real time. The Mongols had already fought it, in their heads, weeks before. Second, decisive points, not decisive battles. Genghis Khan did not try to destroy the entire Jin army at once. He destroyed its ability to function as an army by cutting supply lines, killing messengers, eliminating flanking units, and preventing coordinated response. Each Mongol action targeted the connective tissue of the Jin force, rather than its mass. Once the connective tissue was gone, the mass collapsed on its own. This is the principle that modern military theorists call targeting the system rather than the components, and it was the default operating mode of every major Mongol campaign. Third, the feigned retreat only works if your enemy believes you are afraid. The entire Mongol tactical system depended on the Jin commanders making predictable decisions, and they did, because those decisions were rational. Pursuing a fleeing cavalry unit is the correct instinct. The Mongols exploited correct instincts. They did not win because the Jin made stupid mistakes. They won because they designed a system that turned good military instincts into fatal ones.
The Battle of Yehuling did not end the Jin Dynasty on the day it was fought, but it ended everything that made the Jin Dynasty defensible. Within 2 years, Mongol forces had overrun the northern Jin territories and placed Zhongdu, the capital, the city of 1 million people, the most fortified urban center in East Asia, under siege. The Jin emperor negotiated. He paid tribute. He moved his court south.
none of it was enough. In 1215, Zhongdu fell. The city that had never been taken burned for a month. Travelers reported seeing the ground white with human bones for years afterward.
The Jin Dynasty survived, technically, until 1234, limping along in its reduced southern territories while the Mongols consolidated control of the north. But the dynasty that Genghis Khan had faced across the Gobi in 1211, the empire of 50 million people, 400,000 soldiers, and walls that had held for a century, that dynasty ended at Yehuling. Not with a surrender, with a decision to pursue a cavalry unit that appeared to be running away. History does not remember the Jin commander who ordered that pursuit. It remembers what the pursuit cost him. 400,000 men, mobilized, equipped, supplied, and positioned on favorable ground, defeated by 10,000 who understood one thing the Jin did not. The goal was never to fight the army. The goal was to make the army fight itself. The Mongols didn't consult the math. If you want to know what happened when the Mongols took that same formula, the feigned retreat, the intelligence network, the system that turned your enemy's strengths into traps, and applied it against the Zulu kingdom, the Aztec Empire, and the samurai clans of Japan, that's exactly what this channel is built to show you. Every video in this series takes a battle that rewrote history and tells you exactly how it was won, not just that it was won. Subscribe, and the next one is already waiting for you.